Part 1. The Paradox of Self-Fulfillment. Have you ever felt like you were doing everything right? Chasing your dreams, following your passion, checking all the boxes, and yet something still felt off? Maybe you've heard the messages all around you. Be yourself. Live your truth. Follow your passion. These ideas sound inspiring, but the more we hear them, the more confusing things seem to get. What does it even mean to be fulfilled? Is it about being happy, successful, moral, free? Or is it something deeper, something that connects to who you truly are? This question lies at the heart of human experience, and people across centuries, cultures, and philosophies have tried to answer it. Let's begin by exploring what most people mean when they talk about self-fulfillment. It usually involves becoming your true self, reaching your potential, living with purpose. But even these phrases raise more questions than they answer. Is fulfillment a feeling, a goal, a lifestyle, or is it a way of being? Some say it's about freedom and expression. Others say it's about discipline, virtue, or aligning with something greater than yourself. There's no single answer, and that's exactly why this topic matters so much. Because how you define fulfillment shapes how you live your life. The deeper we go, the more we see that even the idea of the self isn't simple or fixed. Different thinkers have imagined it in radically different ways. Plato saw the self as a soul ruled by reason. Hume thought the self was just a bundle of perceptions. Hegel saw selfhood as something we construct through struggle and recognition. And Buddhist traditions question whether the self exists at all. Depending on which lens you use, self-fulfillment means entirely different things. Some traditions define a good life as one lived with virtue and reason, what Aristotle called eudaimonia. Others, especially in modern culture, center fulfillment on personal freedom and choice. Still others, like existentialists, argue that the world gives us no inherent meaning, and so fulfillment must be something we create, not discover. All of this leaves many of us in a strange place. We're told we can become anything. Yet often, we feel lost or overwhelmed. Be yourself, they say. But what if you don't know who that is? Or worse, what if who you think you are has been shaped by systems, ads, algorithms, and expectations you never chose? That's the paradox of modern fulfillment. It promises everything, but can leave us more anxious and uncertain than ever. So why explore this topic? Because before we can live a fulfilled life, we need to understand what fulfillment even means, where the idea came from, how it evolved, and whether it's a goal worth chasing or a path worth questioning. And most importantly, how to navigate this complexity with honesty and courage. Because fulfillment might not be something you find. It might be something you become. Part 2. Ancient Lessons. What the Greeks taught about fulfillment. Long before modern slogans like "Live your truth" or "Follow your bliss" appeared, ancient thinkers were already asking the same deep question. What does it mean to live well? They weren't just concerned with survival. They were interested in the good life, one that feels rich, meaningful, and true to our nature. The ancient Greeks had a name for this: eudaimonia. It's hard to translate directly, but it's more than happiness. It means flourishing, living in alignment with your highest potential, becoming fully yourself, not in a shallow way, but in a deep, lasting sense. So what did these ancient philosophers actually believe? Plato: find harmony within. Plato believed your soul is made up of 3 parts: reason, spirit, and desire. Reason is your logical mind. Spirit is your ambition and courage. Desire is your craving for pleasure and comfort. According to Plato, fulfillment means harmony. When reason leads, spirit supports, and desire follows. Imagine a well-governed city. That's what your inner world should feel like. Ordered, balanced, wise. But getting there isn't automatic. It requires training your mind, disciplining your impulses, and committing to a life of philosophy and self-examination. For Plato, knowing yourself is the beginning of becoming fulfilled. Aristotle: live with purpose and virtue. Aristotle took a more grounded approach. He asked a simple but powerful question. What is the function of a human being? Just like a knife is designed to cut, or an eye is made to see, humans, he believed, are meant to reason. But not just to think. We're meant to live wisely, to make choices rooted in courage, justice, honesty, and balance. That's what he called virtue. For Aristotle, self-fulfillment isn't about pleasure or success. It's about living out your nature with excellence. And importantly, it's not something you feel. It's something you do. Repeatedly, consistently, over time. You don't just follow your heart. You train it. The Stoics. Control what you can, accept what you can't. The Stoic philosophers, Epictetus, Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, believed fulfillment doesn't come from external things. Not wealth, not comfort, not status. Instead, they focused on one simple rule. Control what you can. Accept what you can't. You can't stop bad weather, traffic, or the opinions of others. But you can control your actions, your choices, your integrity. To them, fulfillment means living with calm, courage, and self-respect, no matter what life throws at you. It's about mastering your responses instead of trying to control the world. Epicurus. Seek pleasure, but redefine it. Epicurus is often misunderstood. People think he preached indulgence, but his real message was the opposite. True pleasure is peace of mind. He believed we suffer because we crave too much. Luxury, fame, power. So he suggested something radical. Simplify. Enjoy the basics. Value friendship. Stop fearing death. Fulfillment, for Epicurus, wasn't about stimulation. It was about tranquility. The fewer unnecessary desires you have, the freer and more fulfilled you become. What the Greeks got right. These thinkers disagreed on many things, but they shared some crucial insights. Fulfillment is about how you live, not what you have. Virtue matters. A lot. Desire is dangerous if it runs the show. You can grow. You can change. They saw the good life not as something given, but as something earned. Through habit, effort, reflection. And even today, their ideas still challenge the modern notion that fulfillment is a feeling or lifestyle. Instead, they remind us, fulfillment is a practice. Not just about doing what feels good, but about becoming someone you're proud of. Part 3. How modern freedom made fulfillment more complicated. So far, we've seen how the ancient Greeks viewed fulfillment as something grounded in virtue, reason, and self-discipline. But then came a massive shift. As the world changed, through revolutions, science, democracy, capitalism, and modern philosophy, our idea of the self, and of what it means to live a good life, began to transform. The new question wasn't just, how do I live well? It became, how do I become free? And with that freedom came a new kind of pressure. Rousseau. Society changed us. Jean-Jacques Rousseau believed we are born authentic, natural, and good. But society, he said, corrupts us. We learn to compare, to compete, to pretend. We perform instead of live. For Rousseau, fulfillment meant peeling back the layers, rediscovering the true self that existed before society's expectations took over. But he also knew how hard that is, because everything around us pulls us away from authenticity. Sound familiar? Kant? Freedom through moral responsibility. Immanuel Kant had a different view. He agreed that freedom mattered. But to him, being free didn't mean doing whatever you want. It meant choosing to do what's right, because it's right. He believed real fulfillment comes from acting with integrity, living by principles you create through reason, not impulse. Kant's version of the fulfilled person isn't someone who follows their feelings. It's someone who respects themselves because they act from a place of moral clarity. It's not always easy, but it's powerful. Mill. Freedom to choose your life. John Stuart. Mill offered a more flexible view. He believed people should be free to live however they want, as long as they don't harm others. Be different, be eccentric, be unique. That's not a problem, it's a strength. Mill thought that a free society lets individuals flourish, and that fulfillment comes from the ability to explore, experiment, and express yourself. But he also recognized something deeper. Freedom alone isn't enough, because freedom brings choices, and choices bring pressure. The Romantics feel everything. Then came the Romantics, poets, artists, dreamers. They didn't want rules or systems. They wanted intensity, passion, emotion. To them, fulfillment wasn't about virtue or duty. It was about being true to your inner fire. They saw suffering, longing, beauty, and love as signs that you were truly alive. This idea still shapes modern culture, from movies to music to therapy. But there's a challenge here too. If your true self is buried deep inside, how do you know when you found it? What if you never do? Modern selfhood, free but fractured. Put it all together. Rousseau's authenticity, Kant's duty, Mill's liberty, the Romantics' emotion, and you get the modern self, free, unique, responsible, but also anxious, overwhelmed, searching. Because now, the burden is entirely on you. You're told, be yourself, find your passion, build your dream life. But if you feel lost, if things don't work out, it's your fault. That's the trap. Freedom without guidance can become pressure. Endless options can become paralyzing. And not everyone starts from the same place. Some people have more privilege, safety, and opportunity than others. So the promise of you can be anything starts to feel hollow. Where does that leave us? Modern individualism gave us freedom, but also loneliness. It gave us possibility, but also pressure. We traded tradition for choice, but now we carry the weight of those choices alone. And that's where existentialism enters the picture. In the next part, we'll meet the thinkers who said, you are free, and that's terrifying. But it's also your greatest chance to create a meaningful life. Part 4, the Existentialists, fulfillment without a map. By now, the idea of fulfillment has already gone through major transformations. The Greeks tied it to virtue. Modern thinkers connected it to freedom. But then came the existentialists, who dropped a bombshell. There is no fixed path, no built-in meaning, no script. You don't discover purpose, you create it. And that realization, it's both terrifying and liberating. Kierkegaard, face yourself or stay in despair. Søren Kierkegaard believed that most people are asleep, not literally, but spiritually. They go through life avoiding the hard questions, afraid of freedom, afraid of truth, afraid of themselves. He called this despair, not the dramatic kind, but a quiet ache that comes from living a life that isn't really yours. He believed fulfillment begins the moment you stop hiding. When you stop playing roles, stop running, and finally take ownership of who you are. It's not about certainty. It's about the courage to make a leap into meaning, into selfhood, into life. Nietzsche, become who you are. Nietzsche took that challenge even further. He declared, God is dead, not as a celebration, but as a wake-up call. Without religious or traditional meaning handed to us, we're left with a raw truth. There's no given structure, no moral blueprint, just you, and the terrifying freedom to decide what matters. Nietzsche believed most people follow what he called herd morality. They conform, stay safe, avoid responsibility. But he challenged us to rise above that, to become what he called the Übermensch, not someone superior to others, but someone who creates their own values and lives with fierce authenticity. Fulfillment, for Nietzsche, means becoming who you truly are, by breaking free from the voices that tell you who to be. Heidegger, you are a being toward death. Martin Heidegger brought an even starker insight. He reminded us of something simple, but profound. You're going to die. And not only that, you know it. Most of us avoid this truth. We distract ourselves, play roles, chase status. But Heidegger said that fulfillment only begins when you face mortality with open eyes. When you realize that your time is limited, everything changes. You stop wasting time on noise. You live more intentionally. You become real. He called this authenticity, not because you found a perfect self, but because you finally stopped pretending. Sartre, you are free, and that's the problem. Jean-Paul Sartre put it bluntly, existence precedes essence. You're not born with a purpose, you make one. That freedom, it's absolute. And that's what makes it so heavy. Sartre said we are condemned to be free, forced to choose, with no excuses. The danger, he warned, is bad faith, pretending you're not free, blaming your job, your past, your circumstances. But deep down, you know you're choosing. Even not choosing is a choice. Fulfillment, in this view, means living in good faith, owning your freedom, your choices, and the meaning you build from them, the existential deal. So what do these thinkers have in common? They don't offer comfort. They don't offer easy answers. But they offer something else, honesty. They tell you that life has no pre-written meaning, and that's exactly what gives you the power to shape it. Fulfillment, in their eyes, isn't a feeling or a reward. It's a way of living, with responsibility, with integrity, with courage. And maybe, just maybe, that's the only kind that truly lasts. Part 5. What if the system is rigged? Let's say you've done everything right. You're reflecting, growing, trying to be yourself. But something still feels wrong, like the game is rigged. You start to wonder, am I really free to choose who I am? Or am I just choosing from options someone else already handed me? That's the question this part explores. Through the eyes of thinkers who saw selfhood not as a private project, but as something deeply shaped by power, systems, and culture. Marx, you are not your work. Karl, Marx started not with your soul, but with your job. He looked at industrial capitalism and saw millions of people spending most of their lives doing labor that felt meaningless, working not for themselves, but for someone else's profit. Marx believed we are naturally creative beings. We want to build, shape, and express ourselves through meaningful work. But under capitalism, that drive gets crushed. People become alienated, not just from their labor, but from themselves. Then the system tells you to buy products, take vacations, find fulfillment. But how can you find yourself, he asked, in a world that turns your life into someone else's business? The Frankfurt School. Your desires are manufactured. Later thinkers like Herbert Marcuse took Marx's ideas further. They pointed out that it's not just work that limits you, it's culture itself. Advertising, entertainment, social norms, they don't just reflect what we want, they shape what we want. Marcuse called these false needs, desires planted in you by systems designed to keep you distracted, compliant, and constantly consuming. You think you're choosing freely, but you're picking from a menu written by someone else. Feminist thinkers, who gets to choose? Feminist philosophers like Simone de Beauvoir and Judith Butler asked, what if the self you're trying to discover is actually one you've been trained to become? De Beauvoir famously wrote, one is not born, but becomes a woman. She wasn't just talking about biology. She meant that identity is shaped by roles, expectations, and pressure, often invisible, often internalized. Judith Butler expanded on this, arguing that gender is performed, repeated again and again until it feels natural. So when we talk about being true to ourselves, we need to ask, which self? The one we choose, or the one we've been conditioned to accept? And that goes beyond gender. It applies to race, class, culture, and every part of identity formed by power structures. Foucault, you're policing yourself. Michel Foucault took all of this one step deeper. He said power doesn't just live in governments or laws. It lives in schools, hospitals, workplaces, norms, even in your thoughts. He showed how we internalize rules, monitoring ourselves, comparing ourselves, judging ourselves. We start playing by invisible scripts to feel normal, to feel acceptable. So even when we think we're being authentic, we might just be following instructions we didn't even realize were there. So, are we ever free? These thinkers weren't trying to make you feel hopeless. They were trying to help you wake up, to realize that if we want real fulfillment, we have to ask harder questions. Who shaped my desires? Who benefits from the choices I think I'm freely making? What would it take to truly reclaim myself? Because sometimes, being free isn't about making better choices inside the system. It's about questioning the system itself. Part 6. What if fulfillment means letting go of the self? Up until now, the idea of fulfillment has been about finding yourself, or creating yourself, or fighting to express your truest self in a world full of noise. But what if that whole story has it backwards? What if fulfillment doesn't come from being more you, but from realizing that you were never separate to begin with? That's exactly what some of the world's oldest spiritual traditions suggest. Instead of fixing, discovering, or empowering the self, they offer something else. Let go. Buddhism. The self is just a story. In Buddhism, the big insight is simple and profound. There is no solid, permanent self. What we think of as me, our thoughts, preferences, personality, is just a temporary cluster of experiences, always changing, always reacting, never fixed. Buddhism teaches that our suffering comes from clinging to things, to identities, to control. We think we need to become someone, but the more we chase it, the more lost we feel. The path to freedom? Not becoming more, but holding on less. Through mindfulness, compassion, and meditation, you don't find the self. You liberate yourself from it. And in that space, there's peace, clarity, freedom. Taoism. Stop forcing, start flowing. Taoism, from ancient China, flips modern ambition on its head. Where the West says, go harder, Taoism says, stop pushing. The Tao, the way, is the natural rhythm of life. It's not something you conquer. It's something you align with. The ideal is Wu Wei, non-forcing. Like water that flows around rocks, adapting effortlessly. Fulfillment, in this view, doesn't come from striving. It comes from trusting, from softening, from becoming part of the world's rhythm instead of fighting against it. You don't dominate life. You merge with it. Hindu philosophy. You are not separate. In Vedanta, a school of Hindu thought, there's a core belief, your true self, Atman, is not separate from Brahman, the universal reality. That means the deepest you is not a person or a mind or a name. It's the same essence that lives in everything. But most people forget this. They get caught up in Maya, the illusion of separateness. Fulfillment here doesn't mean self-expression. It means self-realization, awakening to the truth that you are not just in the universe, you are the universe. Through stillness, reflection, and surrender, the illusion dissolves. You don't gain an identity. You remember what you always were. Indigenous wisdom. You exist in relationship. Many indigenous and animist traditions don't even talk about the self as something separate. Instead, they speak in terms of relationship, with land, with ancestors, with community, with spirit. You are not a lone individual trying to find yourself. You are part of a web, woven through story, ritual, nature, and shared responsibility. Fulfillment here means living in balance, honoring what came before, caring for what sustains life, playing your role in the larger whole, not for status, but for stewardship. You don't own your identity. You inherit and co-create it, moment by moment, with others. The deeper thread, let go to become whole. These traditions look very different, but they share one radical idea. The ego is not the answer. You don't have to fight to become more. You can let go, soften, reconnect, and in doing so, realize you were never really separate. This kind of fulfillment isn't loud. It's not about winning, building, or branding. It's quiet, still, complete. And maybe that's why it's so powerful. Part 7. Can psychology help us grow without losing ourselves? Up to this point, we've explored fulfillment through philosophy, culture, systems, and even spiritual surrender. But there's another powerful lens to look through. Psychology. Not just abstract theory, but real, personal questions. Why do I feel stuck? Can I change? What kind of life feels right for me? Psychology doesn't offer final answers, but it does offer tools, and maybe even a path toward growth that feels grounded. Maslow. First you survive, then you grow. Abraham Maslow created one of the most famous models of human development. At the bottom are your basic needs: food, safety, stability. At the top is what he called self-actualization, becoming the fullest version of yourself. His key insight was simple. You can't grow if you're in survival mode. You can't write a novel if you're starving. You can't explore your purpose if you don't feel safe or loved. But once your foundation is solid, something awakens. You want more than comfort. You want meaning. Later in life, Maslow added another level above self-actualization: self-transcendence, the desire to go beyond yourself, to serve something bigger, to connect with truth, beauty, or spirit. So growth doesn't stop at you. It moves outward. Rogers. Everyone can become whole. Carl Rogers, another major figure in psychology, took a different route, but came to similar conclusions. As a therapist, he believed that every person has the capacity to grow, but only in the right environment. That means being accepted unconditionally, being listened to with honesty, being free from judgment. When people feel safe, they stop hiding, they stop performing, and that's when real transformation begins. Rogers called this the path of the fully functioning person, someone who is alive, present, emotionally open, and constantly evolving. Not perfect, just real. Fulfillment as process, not prize. What both Maslow and Rogers agreed on is crucial. Fulfillment is not something you chase and catch. It's something you grow into, step by step. Not by following a formula, but by being honest with yourself and with others. Not by achieving perfection, but by learning to live authentically and congruently, where your outer life reflects your inner truth. You don't find wholeness, you practice it, but growth isn't always smooth. There's a catch. Real life is messy. Many people grow up without safety, without support, without the space to be themselves. They carry trauma, fear, deep wounds. In those cases, talking about self-actualization can feel out of reach. Psychologists like Bessel van der Kolk and Judith Herman have shown how trauma affects the nervous system, making survival the priority. So before you can thrive, you might need to first feel safe. In those moments, fulfillment isn't about chasing goals. It's about healing, reclaiming lost parts of yourself, finding calm in your own body. And that's just as meaningful. Positive psychology. What makes life worth living? More recently, researchers like Martin Seligman have tried to measure fulfillment. His PERMA model includes positive emotions, engagement, being in the zone, relationships, meaning, accomplishment. The point? Happiness is only part of the picture. We also need connection, challenge, and purpose. It's not just about you. Today, psychology is shifting again toward the idea that selfhood is relational. Who you are is shaped by your environment, your relationships, your community. You're not just a brain making choices. You're a person woven into a web of life. So maybe fulfillment isn't about becoming a solitary, perfected self. Maybe it's about being part of something real, where you are seen, needed, and connected. So can psychology help? Yes, but only if we're honest about what growth really looks like. It's not always shiny. It's not always quick. Sometimes it's just taking a breath, being kind to yourself, feeling safe for the first time in a long time. And that alone can be the beginning of a fulfilled life. Part 8. Why we need each other to be ourselves. So far, most of the journey has focused inward. Find yourself. Grow yourself. Let go of yourself. Heal yourself. But now it's time to ask a different question. What if you can't become yourself by yourself? What if fulfillment doesn't live inside your head, but in your relationships? What if who you are depends on being seen? Hegel, recognition makes you real. The philosopher G.W.F. Hegel had a bold idea. He believed the self isn't something you uncover through introspection. It's something you become through recognition. From the moment you're born, you're looking for confirmation. Do you see me? Do I matter? Am I real to you? Hegel said identity forms in that exchange. We become who we are when others reflect us back. When someone says, "Yes, I see you. You exist." Without that, something stays incomplete. Taylor and Honneth. We become through relationships. Modern philosophers like Charles Taylor and Axel Honneth expanded on this. They argued that selfhood is deeply relational. We build identity through conversations, feedback, care, and conflict. Through being loved, through being challenged, through being needed. Without recognition, people feel invisible. And that invisibility doesn't just hurt emotionally, it disrupts your sense of self. So fulfillment doesn't just come from finding meaning within, it also comes from being valued by others when the mirror breaks. But here's the hard truth. Not everyone gets recognized equally. Some people are ignored, dismissed, stereotyped, othered. And when your identity is constantly rejected or misrepresented, you start to internalize that. You shrink. You doubt. You disconnect. This isn't just social injustice. It's psychological violence. Recognition, then, isn't just about compliments. It's about being treated like a full human being. And when that's denied, it's not just unfair. It's wounding. Fulfillment is shared. All of this leads to a powerful insight. You don't become whole alone. You need people, not to complete you, but to connect you, to listen, to affirm, to challenge, to witness. Fulfillment, in this sense, is never purely personal. It's built in relationship, in community, in trust. Who you are is a dialogue. You are not a solo story. You are a conversation between you and your family, you and your friends, you and your culture, you and the world. And maybe the most human need of all is simply to be recognized, genuinely, deeply, and without conditions. That's not weakness. That's what makes us real. Part 9. So, what is fulfillment, really? We've gone all the way around the idea of fulfillment, through Greek virtue, through modern freedom, through existential doubt, through systems, spirit, psychology, and connection. And at this point, one thing should be clear. Fulfillment isn't simple, and it's not one size fits all. But that's exactly what makes it worth exploring, because the search itself reveals what we value, what we're willing to fight for, let go of, or grow toward. So what have we learned? It's not just a feeling. Fulfillment isn't just about feeling good. It's about being aligned with your values, your actions, your relationships, and your place in the world. Sometimes it feels like joy. Other times, it's more like honesty, or peace, or courage. It's not a constant high. It's a deeper kind of coherence, a sense that you're living on purpose. It's not always about the self. Yes, self-awareness matters, but so does self-transcendence. You might find fulfillment not by focusing on yourself, but by serving, connecting, creating, or caring for others. Sometimes, letting go of the need to constantly work on yourself is the most freeing move you can make. It's personal, but never private. Your inner life is shaped by outer forces. Your choices are influenced by history, culture, inequality, and power. So real fulfillment isn't just personal growth. It's also about questioning the systems that shape your identity and reclaiming your agency. You don't find it, you practice it. Fulfillment isn't a destination. It's a way of showing up, moment by moment, decision by decision. It's something you build through reflection, action, and connection. You don't have to get it perfect. You just have to get real. Final thought. It's not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming true. Here's the bottom line. You don't have to become your best self in some polished, idealized way. You just have to become your honest self. The one that's alive, flawed, curious, and trying. The one that grows, that questions, that connects, that forgives. Fulfillment isn't a thing you win. It's a life you live, with clarity, depth, and a kind of quiet, grounded courage. And maybe that's enough. Actually, maybe that's everything. In the end, fulfillment isn't a puzzle to be solved. It's a lifelong process, shaped by your choices, your struggles, your values, and your connections. It asks you to be honest, to ask hard questions, to resist easy answers. It asks you to look inward without getting stuck there, to look outward without losing yourself, and to look beyond, towards something bigger than either. You may never arrive at a final definition, but you can live in a way that feels aligned, meaningful, and real. Not because you followed a perfect path, but because you walked your own. And that, in itself, is a kind of fulfillment.